moment. I am more comforted with the idea that there's more resources close by in order to do what needed to be done. So that's my 2 cents again.
Russ?
Yeah, I have a question. With the withdrawal of Alltech bid, would that not facilitate Hemet gatekeepers qualifying for local vendor preference?
Because the prices are the same, it doesn't come into effect, because if you give them a 5% discount, there's nothing, they already have it $9, unless you would like to ask them to honor a 5% discount, that would be up to you. But because the prices are the same, we don't need to give a local vendor preference to give.
Okay. But there's still the low bidder anyhow, with Alltech withdrawing.
No.
Tied.
No, they're both at $9.
Right, they're tied with Power Security.
Yes.
But Alltech withdrew, which previously would have been
Yes, so
the
yes,
low
they
bidder.
would be the lowest bidder.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to editorialize a little bit, if I might. First of all, I think I appreciate the fact that we have a local company bidding on this project and this contract. And I agree with Bonnie. When you're dealing with security issues and all of the unknowns that come associated with security, and the fact that there is an ongoing dynamic that might require you to have some additional resources available, and so a shorter response time to me would be desirable. But philosophically, I think as we're trying to enhance the image of our city and advocating people bringing business to this community, we have a local company, albeit a fledgling company, that has shown an interest and has acquired quite a number of clients in a short amount of time. And we heard at our previous discussion a number of people advocate for them, that they've had not only good service from them, but substantially better service than what they were receiving with previous companies. So I guess my editorial is, I live in an HOA community that contracts for security services. And we recently went through a similar process and looked at a number of vendors. And at the time that we did that, Hemet Gatekeepers wasn't around yet. But we opted to go with essentially a fledgling company because of what they represented in customer service and response time and work ethic, essentially, over a number of well-established other companies. So I personally don't have any qualms about contracting with a newer company. The only thing that I found in looking at comparison of all of them is that Hemet Gatekeepers doesn't currently do any drug screening. And I would certainly advocate that would be a valuable thing to do, because I think that in today's society, unfortunately, it's become a necessity to drug screen employees. So I think that's the only hiccup that I would see about Hemet Gatekeepers. So, and I think that they've indicated that if the city preferred that they do that, they would have no problems adding that to their employment qualifications. So that's my comments for now.
Thank you. Linda, do you have any?
You stole my question. Thank you.
Harley? This is a public hearing. Sarah, do you have any speakers?
I do. Louis Kim
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your Honor and council members of...
Make sure the light's on and have it close to your...
Green?
There you
Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Hemet City Council. My name is Louis Kim. I've been with Patrol Masters for about 6 years, and 2 years before that when I was servicing the city of Hemet Parks with California West Patrol before Patrol Masters took over back in 2012. The last few years I've been in the office since a year, I'm sorry, let me step back. A year ago I took a step down and came into the Hemet, Temecula, and San Diego area. So I've been more focused on this area instead of working out of Santa Ana. I've been working out of Temecula office. Also staffed 4 patrol officers in this area, one to staff 10 hours at night to cover Hemet areas and a couple of other HOAs and communities that we service. And a Temecula area and the San Diego area, 10 hours a night, 3 patrol shifts. The parks, normally we do the lockups when sundown around 7, and then we added on the Simpson Park a few months ago where we're doing 2 inspections before midnight, and then the rest of the parks, one before midnight during closing hours early evening, and then one after midnight to make sure there's all clear, to make sure there's no unwanted activity. I know we had an incident at the Memorial area during the Memorial weekend, and just unfortunately we couldn't catch that during our time of inspection with the time ladder we have. But if we can catch them, we will definitely catch them and report and follow procedures according to what we need to do. Just wanted to mention the history that we have and wanted to move forward with a business relationship with the city of Hemet. If you have any questions, I can answer any questions.
You have any questions for Mr. Kim? I have one before you leave. Out of your patrol officers that can cover this area, how many of them live within the city of Hemet?
One lives in Marietta and one lives in Hemet.
Okay.
All right. Full-time officer does live in Hemet.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good evening. Hope it's not too long.
Next speaker.
He'll be followed by Sid from Power Security.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brian Calindris, Quality Assurance Manager of Absolute International Security. We are looking to partner up with the city, its staff members, and its community in regards to the Securing Services Park Securing Services proposal. AIS is currently servicing Kern County, Los Angeles County, San Bernardino, Orange County, and Riverside County. To mention into Riverside County, we are expanding majorly out here. We just acquired a major contract with the RTA that has forced us to look into satellite offices. We currently have added a management team to service all of Riverside County, which consists of an account manager, field supervisors, quality assurance supervisors, and all of its staff members to have a quick response to all of our existing and potentially future clients. The company provides armed and unarmed services. We're not just a service provider, we are a training facility as well, federally and state certified. I mention this because either in this industry you're one or the other. You're either a service provider or a training facility. We have the luxury to be both, where we could hand choose our candidates and pretty much tailor a security service program to each of our clients to provide services to their standards and expectations. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Any questions? I will ask you the same thing. How many of your employees live in the city of Hemet?
With the expansion into the RTA account, it forced us to hire 50 new officers, 20 which are dedicated to them, 10 of them which are backup, and 20 which leave me open to staff within the Riverside local county, Hemet area, Corona area, and Riverside.
How many of those live in the city?
In Hemet?
In Hemet.
In Hemet, I have 5 of them.
Thank you.
And then, excuse me, we're actually already currently servicing clients here in the city of Hemet as well, the Pepper Tree community.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell me the name of your, what was your business called again?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Absolute International Security.
Thank you.
The next speaker.
Instead of be followed by Steve Norman.
If you could state your name for the record.
My name is Cheryl with Power Security.
Welcome.
Your Honors.
What was your last name again?
Lyden, Lyden.
Thank you.
Power Security Group has so many services that will be of great benefit to the city, but I'm told that we have 3 minutes to talk. So Absolute pretty much said a mouthful, and I'm going to have to follow his lead on some of the stuff that he said. However, we don't let our address fool you. We have a contract with Hemet Ryan Airport. We have 2 employees over there. They both live in Hemet. And, of course, if we were to be awarded the contract, we would hire locally within Hemet. And we're very successful at that contract at the airport right now. I gave you a handout that you can read in your leisure. It just has the pictures of our uniforms and our 24-hour communication and dispatch center, and a few of our clients that we currently contract with. We too own our own on-site state licensed training academy with certified instructors and state certified instructors, NRA and Red Cross certified. Any questions?
Any questions? Then I was going to ask you the same thing. How many do you have that live in Hemet?
2.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Romero and City Council, Steve Norman from Hemet Gatekeepers. Just want to give you just a brief overview of what's been accomplished with Hemet Gatekeepers since we started as a watch team in January of 2017, and we became a company in August 1st of 2017. All of our guards that we have now are all employed, and they have to have a guard card by the BSIS requirements. And in that guard card, they also have to be live scanned and passed by the DOJ. Every one of our guards has passed that examination. One of the things that we take a lot of pride in is our ability to have them go through de-escalation techniques, because, as you know, Hemet, Florida Avenue, its corridor, oftentimes has people that don't want to be moved, don't want to get off property, don't want to be cited for 602s, and so we do not want to get into a confrontational situation in which that problem escalates. So we take a lot of time in training our guards in de-escalation techniques. Currently, and it's just been so exciting to work in the city to recognize what can happen to a local company that starts out as we did and the city gets behind it. I'm proud to report we have 70 clients to date since August 1st. All those clients are both businesses and 55 plus communities. It's just been so exciting to watch what the community has done for us as a company. One of the things that we all have to have is to be licensed not only by the city, which we have our own business license, but we also have been recently licensed by the state of California. We have our own PPO number now, and we're proud to report that. You asked about drug testing, and after the question was asked, I went to our primary supervisor, and he has now implemented drug testing, drug screening into our program for both new hires and reasonable suspicion. One of the things I'd like to point out is that, as far as I know, we are the only company that has applied in which the city Hemet Police Department has inspected both our uniforms and our vehicles. Many people don't know, but there are compliance issues, not just with BSIS, but with local municipalities. So the city of Hemet, its lieutenant who does that, came on site and inspected every single one of our vehicles, our uniforms, and all of them have passed and are in compliance. We do have the GPS tracking, and one of the things that we're very proud of is we have digital communications, which means that those that are trying to find out or scan where we are and what we're doing will not have that ability. And that's so important because we'll have as many as 7 vehicles out at night, and to have backup and the ability to support our guards when they're in a confrontational situation, we can have response time within 3 to 5 minutes. Having said all that with the technical aspect of it, all of our guards also have personal body cams. And as you know, in every confrontation, what's recorded is essential, and every one of our guards has a body cam that has to be on in any kind of conflict or any kind of confrontation. But most importantly, I've valued our relationship with the Hammett Police Department and also the local municipalities here with the fire department. We love this city. It would be an honor for us to be able to serve in this capacity. It's been something that we've hoped we'd had on our resume for quite some time. And we just thank you once again for the opportunity to serve you as a city. Thank you.
Don't go away yet. Any questions for Sting? I have the same question for you. Out of all your guards, how many of them live in the city?
15. We have 15 part-time, full-time employees, and 13 of them are here in Hammett.
And you said you have 70 clients. How many of those are in the city?
All of them, both Hammett, and I think we have 5 in San Jacinto.
So all 70 are in the
65, yeah, all 70 are in Hammett, San Jacinto. We're primarily and only focused on Hammett and San Jacinto.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay. Comments before I make mine?
Motion?
No, before I make my comments.
I'm very pleased that we have coverage for going for a contract for best value. I am glad that we have local companies that are participating in services for our residents and for the city itself, and all absolutely great companies. Go ahead and make a comment.
First, I want to thank all of you that came out to speak on behalf of your company, your security company. That means a lot because it shows that you actually have an interest, because we've had meetings before where companies that were bidding didn't come out to speak on their behalf, so thank you for that. Secondly, I want to point out that, well, as Alltech has backed out as the lowest bidder, I was going to make an argument for the best value portion of it, and that goes back to why I asked the question of how many of your employees live in the city. And the reason why I asked that is because to provide best value, I can justify, in my mind, I can justify paying a couple $1,000s more above the lowest bidder, or be in the fact that if your employees live in this city, you're vested here, and you're spending your money that you're earning here. And so the tax dollars that the city will receive because of those employees that live and work in our city will far outpace that $2,000 extra per year. So that's where I'm at. I think that for me, it's important that this company is local. The employees are local because they're vested in our community, and we're still constantly trying to overcome a negative stigma that our community has. However, this community is still a great place to live, work, and play.
In addition to that, gatekeepers started to make a big difference in this community. And they did. And they have. I know that personally, I look around at areas that weren't so nice to have to drive by. Fortunately, before gatekeepers actually got a bunch of contracts and they did it because they knew the city needed it, and we needed to move forward and help stop the image that was being portrayed out there. So they stepped up. People began to notice. And because they were doing such a great job, others wanted to contract with them. I think that speaks volumes, because businesses would not have engaged gatekeepers if they didn't think they were doing a good job. And I think that's really important to say. Not that other security companies couldn't do the job, wouldn't do the job, but there's one I know that has the heart to do the job because they live here. They see it every day. It means something. It means something to them to clean it up and help Hemet move forward. And again, I think that's an important aspect of any of the security companies that have applied, and we appreciate all that had. But again, the proof is in the pudding as to how Gatekeepers has helped in the blight and the riffraff and the problems that the businesses have had. And since contracting with Gatekeepers, it's not the problem that they experienced for years on end. So I appreciate that company for stepping up, and they really didn't have to, and made a big difference in our city.
Any other comments or questions?
Just to coattail on a couple of comments that are already made. I too thank all of the representatives and the companies for showing an interest in submitting a bid. And I don't intend to cast any aspersions on the integrity of those businesses or their employees. But I really and truly do feel that the heart of a company, the Hemet Gatekeepers, grew out of, actually, my interpretation, and you can correct me if you want, my interpretation is it grew out of a passion to want to do something to help improve this community. It did not grow out of a desire to establish a business. And a business evolved because there was a recognition by the community members and businesses that they were providing a very much needed and desirable service. And that even reinforced the heart that was there at the beginning. So I think that it's a difficult field. We found that out in our HOA when we were looking for companies. There's a tremendous amount of turnover in employees, and there's an awful lot of they're fishing in a pretty shallow pond of employee applicants, I'll put it that way. And the fact that we have a company, and again I'll use the word fledgling, but they have proven themselves in a very short amount of time. And so I think you're getting the gist of where I'm leaning.
Are there any more comments? All right, seeing none, I'd like to make a motion.
Before you make a motion, I believe the consensus of the council is that your motion is going to be for Hemet Gatekeepers.
That is great.
If I could have Crystal put up the factors for best value, I think it would just be helpful to review and place this in the context before you make your motion. So just in summary of what the council has discussed so far, we know that Hemet Gatekeepers is now tied for the lowest cost. And so certainly criteria A tends to lend in their favor. Their ability, capacity, and skill, we've heard testimony from Mr. Norman about their ability, the licenses, what they do, the programs that they have. The council placed great weight in the fact that not only are they located here, but their employees are here. That plays into, obviously, element C with the ability of the vendor to provide requested services timely and within the time mannered or the time requested. I also heard comments from the council
direct experience with the vendor and where they came from and what they've done in the community so far, which not only speaks to experience, but elements E and F, which is integrity and reputation. I'm sorry, not F, it's D and E. And then finally, the council's not limited to just the items that are listed here. It can consider other elements, and the mayor very aptly pointed out that local businesses with locally employed and residing employees can cause a multiplier effect for the economy, which takes dollars Hemet spends on the contract and then multiplies it out in the community because of purchases of food, housing, rent, and so forth. And so I think that summarizes the criteria for why, in the council's opinion, Hemet Gatekeepers represents the best value in this case. If there are additional elements, you can certainly add to those. If not, I think you can proceed with your motion at this time.
I would like to add too, so you mentioned the integrity, reputation, judgment under E. I think one of those things that adds to that, especially in today's digital age, the fact that the Hemet Gatekeepers all wear body cams, that tends to keep people honest. And so I think that's an additional value to that. So with that, I would like to move that we move forward with the contract with the Hemet Gatekeepers as the best value for the city, and award the contract with Hemet Gatekeepers as determined that it was the best value, and authorize the city manager to execute park securing services agreement with Hemet Gatekeepers, provider effective July 1st, 2018 for an initial 3-year term with 2 1-year options to extend, as well as exercise renewal options and approved extension amendments. And
Second.
So please vote. All right. That passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. Thank you. I'd like to thank all of those of you who applied for this contract, and I wish you best success in your business. Thank you. Up next, we're looking at the presentation of the 2018-19 recommended annual general fund budget. Mr. City Manager, Deputy City Manager, Finance Director, whoever it shall be.
We're going to have a short presentation of PowerPoint, but before I do that, I want to highlight a couple things that were in the budget message. The city has been going through steps for the last probably 5 years or so dealing with cuts to the general fund. We've reduced you have reduced employees from 271 to 217. There's been a reduction in compensation and benefits. You reduced the library service hours. We now have reduced retirement benefits for new employees. And you've outsourced animal control, custodial services, landscape maintenance, servers provided to the Hemet Simpson Center, and of course solid waste. The situation that you went through was exacerbated by the state taking away redevelopment, and they took combined takeaways over 2 years of $5.2 million from the city. The city returned $10 million in RDA funds, and we've lost tax increment of approximately $6 to $7 million a year. The League of California Cities has estimated that CalPERS costs for public safety employees will climb to well over 60% of payroll in the next decade, and Governor Brown has stated that cities are on their own as the pension tab rises. Chris is going to present a very shortened form of our revenues and where we made the cuts. And then I'm going to deal just with the Measure U funding. Go ahead.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor, members of the council. First off, I'd just like to say that Lorena had a family emergency come up, so, I know that her family's in our thoughts, and from, the city family to yours, we're thinking about you and hope that everything is going well. So when that type of stuff comes up, obviously that hits us in the heart. So just an overview, we went over this at the last budget workshop, but we'll go over it again. The general fund is the primary fund of the city. It's used to account for all revenues and expenditures of the city, not legally restricted as to use. This fund is used to accumulate the cost of the city's general operations and services such as parks, fire, and police protection. So this brief presentation will cover just the general fund component of the city's budget. So this next table before you illustrates the total revenues for the city of Hemet. On your document that you have in front of you, I've bolded the highest revenue sources that we have for the city of Hemet. And those items are property taxes, sales tax, the Measure U tax, as well as the intergovernmental motor vehicle license fee. One thing that should be pointed out and noted is that those items that I've bolded are typically related to how the economy is performing, not just in the city of Hemet, but across cities in the state of California. So again, as the economy improves or as the economy tends to stabilize, you're going to see those higher generating revenue sources as being more stable or slightly increasing. And again, on that note, those revenues that are bolded, I've got the figure. When you take into account property taxes, sales tax, and intergovernmental motor vehicle license fee combined, those items total approximately $26.2 million, roughly 65% of the general fund revenues, excluding Measure U. So again, the volatility as it relates to revenues is, clearly exemplified there. So when we talk about our general fund expenditures, we can pretty much tie them to these operations in the city council, the city manager, the city clerk, the finance department, the treasurer, human resources, police, fire, parks, library, engineering, and community development. So based on the May 24th budget workshop that we hosted, it was clear that there was over a $3.5 million deficit. So with revenues being $51.6 million and expenditures being $55.1 million, obviously there was some reductions and some adjustments that needed to be made to account for that $3.5 million deficit. So the figure on the left shows what was done to balance the budget. The first item was to move the cost of public safety increases to Measure U for fiscal year 18-19, and that total is approximately $1.7 million. Number two, hiring moratorium at city manager's discretion for fiscal year 18-19, approximately $1 million. And finally, fund balances to generate one-time savings of approximately $800,000. So with the utilization of all those three measures, we've been able to make up the $3.5 million deficit in order to balance the city's budget. The item number two, I know that there may be some questions related to the hiring moratorium. Just like in any organization or any agency, there's typical attrition that happens throughout the year. And so based on that attrition that happens, obviously at the city manager's discretion, The desire or the need to fill positions, obviously, will be at the discretion of the city manager. So although some departments may not have current vacancies as status quo, there is the likelihood that those departments will experience vacancies, and it's typical to see those types of savings in any given budget year. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alan to go over the Measure U spending plan for the first 5 years.
I thought I'd take this opportunity to tell you a little bit of my background, because I'm rather new here. Most of you don't know me. I had my first introduction to balancing a budget in the city of Compton. In the late 1970s, Jarvis-Gann passed, and 2/3 of the property tax were taken away from cities. And so we immediately entered an age of what we called cutback management. In Compton itself, we abolished over 2 years 300 positions, including 30 positions in police plus additional positions in fire. Their total deficit was $5 million. In today's economy, it's about $19 million in today's dollars. So that was my first experience in that. I was retained by the city of Oak Park, Illinois, because of my cutback management experience. I've made 2 presentations in Canada to the Secretary and Administrators Association dealing with cutback management also. When I went to Oak Park, they were, in 3 years, they wouldn't have a general fund left, and so we cut some policemen, we cut some firemen, etc. I tend to last about 3 years when we go through this process, because it's tough on everybody, and I'm seen in a certain light as a hatchet man. I was recruited in San Bernardino because of my experience, and they had entered bankruptcy. And so I was instrumental in providing oversight to the bankruptcy committee, eventually working a deal with the fire department that they joined the San Bernardino County Fire Protection District. That was different than it is here because they had $40 million worth of lawsuits against the city. And so we were able to negotiate that down as well as pay some of the money through the bankruptcy. And so that was the trade-off that we worked out there. All the cities in California that were entered bankruptcy, Vallejo, Stockton, and San Bernardino, as a condition of coming out of bankruptcy, they had to do a tax, a voter-approved tax. And so all 3 have done that, and in all 3 cases, it was usually done for public safety purposes. So what's unique about this city, you've already done it, Measure U. And so you'd have trouble going into bankruptcy in that you've already fulfilled one of the requirements of coming out of bankruptcy. So I don't think we're anything near that. I want to go to the next slide, really, because if I can figure this out. Okay. The last slide. Public safety and salary benefit increases 1.7 million times 5 years equals $8.5 million. And so if you notice, that's about the same as your reserve. And so we had a choice here of taking the $8.5 million out of the reserve over the term of the contract, or asking that we start taking the salary increases out of the Measure U itself. And so my choice is to recommend that we take it out of the Measure U itself. One of the things we've been working on with both police and fire, and it ends up being a sheet like this, we wanted to assure both police and fire that there were sufficient monies and savings from each year to fund what their programs are for 5 years. And so we've sat down, and there's been several renditions of this, but this is approximately where we're at now. In 17-18, we're going to receive about $11 million. Fire costs are $1.5 million, police is $6.2. We have a total cost of $8 million, and there's a savings of $3 million. In this particular budget, revenues are going to be about $11.2 million as opposed to the $10 million. Fire anticipates spending $2.4, police $7.2, and so that leaves a budget surplus of $9.6 million. The following year, we'll have a budget surplus of, $1.6 million in 18-19, and then $2.7 in 19-20. In 2021, another $2.4 million, and another $2.5 million in the fifth year. So the 5-year cumulative savings are $12.2 million. There's some leftover savings of $700,000 from 16-17, so we anticipate a project fund balance of $12.9 million at the end of the 5-year period. The police chief has redone his program for the next year, and it will cost approximately $50,000 less than what we have out there, but we believe that the money we are portraying is based on pretty much what the programmatic expenses will be for each of the years. So, if you subtract from the savings of $12.9 million, if we took every year and paid that out of Measure U funds, as of June 30th, 2022, we still have a fund balance of $4.4 million. And so the choice left up to, at least from my standpoint, was, yes, we could go through and do some more whacking, as been done over the last few years, but you're not going to come close to what that deficit was of $3.5 million. And so we took $1.7 million, at least for the 18-19 budget, and then as Chris pointed out, we did it's a salary savings of about 4%. In many budgets, I've usually figured that at 5%. So that's what the $1 million is. It's a salary savings. People are going to leave. People are going to retire. New people are going to come in at a lower step increase that's in the budget and such. So we'll actually experience that $1 million. We actually think it'll be $1.4 million, but we're being conservative on the estimate. And then we had money set aside in some of our funds that were not being used, general funds. Insurance, liability, whatever, insurance. And so we've included that in the budget to make up we have a balanced budget, revenues equal expenditures. I don't think we're going to be able to go through it tonight, but I would like the opportunity for each of you to go through it page by page with us, to have our staff here, etc. But I think we're going to need, a special session, not a council meeting, to do that. And so we can't do it this week, we'll never finish it. So I'm wondering if next Friday or Thursday or so, we can get together and go through this item by item, as you wish. Be glad to answer any questions. If the council chooses not to attach salary increases, we believe the salary increases that they're being paid keeps people here because they're making more money and attracts more people coming in because we're paying highest salaries. And so we believe that contributes to the boots on the ground, and the reason for the Measure U tax. I know it runs counter to a resolution adopted by the council, but I didn't feel I had any choices but to go down this road.
Does this go counter? Because if it's paying for retention and salaries, then it does not. Can you speak on that?
Now, use of the money from Measure U, as the city manager's outlined, is consistent with the resolution that the council adopted on the use of Measure U funds.
Can you say that again? They didn't hear you.
Council adopted a resolution committing to use measure funds only for public safety. The proposal by the city manager to use those to pay for public safety salary increases is consistent with the resolution that they adopted. It's an allowable expense under both Measure U as a tax and under the resolution which the council adopted.
You don't have to make that decision tonight. Obviously, you want to see the whole budget, and you may decide that you want to cut elsewhere rather than doing that. My feeling is we're understaffed due to steps taken over the last few years. We have a one-person city clerk who's anticipating possibly retiring, and by the end of the year. We have nobody trained. Normally you have a deputy clerk in there. We have nobody trained that's been schooled, that's certificated to step into that position. We anticipate getting more activity regarding development and such, and so we need the engineering in place. Deanna needs, to process that. And so there are just certain needs that we have that affect the general fund primarily that we are not putting into this budget to anticipate. I may come back on a deputy clerk or something shortly because that has to be done. So our hands are kind of strapped. We do have a balanced budget. It's going to be, I think, a little hard in anticipating and paying for some of the increases that we need. But nonetheless, we're going to have to figure out how to do that. So one of the things that Chris did not talk about, but we had talked about earlier, Chris and I need to be given the opportunity over the next 12 months to take a look at every function that we have. If it can be done in a different fashion, if something else can be contracted out. I'm not trying to scare people, but that's what needs to be done. Chris and I have a lot of experience in doing that. We see no reason to have to bring in a consultant. We can do that on our own. So we will be examining that. That just has to be done. So, okay.
Comment that I would like to make is that I noticed in your projections, your revenue projections, your projections don't show any increases in tax revenue. It seems to be that the projections are flatline, and that is kind of disheartening to me in the fact that we're not looking at growing our economy in the city. I think that's going to be something that's very important moving forward, is that our economy in this city continues to grow. I know that we went to Las Vegas to try to get some folks to come out here and look at our community as a viable place to bring their business. I think that as we move forward, that we continue to look at what those projections, those sales tax revenue increases look like, as we continue to bring in more business and more residents into our city.
I would absolutely hope so. We've got some positive feedback, some development interested in the city. Don't want to count any chickens before they're hatched. But hopefully we can, sales tax has been kind of static, for lack of another word. And so over the next, 3, 4, or 5 years, I would hope we'd be able to do 4, 5, 10% increases in that. It's not reflected relative to the Measure U. We just looked at that. It is reflected in terms of the increased revenue that Measure U will accrue over the $10 million. We think it's going to be $1 million to $1.5 million per year. So there is some, that's not because of growth, but because HDL underestimated the amount of money that we would receive from the tax. So,
one other thing I'd like to point out too is that, and I think it might be a cost-saving area, is that I know that our fire department has been challenged with getting vacant positions filled, mainly for the purpose of, well, 2 purposes. One, so that our guys aren't working every day all the time, 24 hours a day, every day of the week, 365 days a year. That will be, now that those positions are filled, and I think that the chief, he worked hard in getting those positions filled. We challenged him, and he told us 9 months. We told him, no, do it in 3. He did it in 6. I think that's important, that those overtime numbers are going to be reduced, and that's a way to reflect, because now that we're fully staffed.
Right. Overtime costs are very high for fire.
I also challenged the chief to be able to keep those overtime costs under control.
Right. It should be reduced with the additional positions that are there. And talking with Chief Webb, I believe he's got 6 positions to fill from Measure U this coming year. He said he's going to have probably a difficulty filling all 6 in a 12-month period.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, so
competing with how many different agencies to get
right.
a very small pool of officers hired.
Right. So there may be, well, we're kind of reflecting that in the $1 million savings that we're showing, which is across the board, due to inability to recruit people when we exactly need them, and the fact that people will retire, people will resign, etc. I think we've depicted a fairly accurate picture. It's nice not to have to go to reserves if our recommendation is followed, and it kind of sets a nice tone. Right. I mean, I came up here and said, the sky is falling. So we're preventing the sky from falling, and we're not eating up any more reserves if this is followed. And I think that's very important for us to become balanced and start living within our means.
I think, too, that there's an expectation in this community that that a level of expectation, and to meet that level costs money. And for our police chief and our fire chief to be able to not just hire, but to retain those officers, to keep them working here, so that level of expectations by the citizens is met. And I think that's what's key, and the fact that to fit within the means of what the resolution states also.
In the budget message, I actually thank the citizens, the council, and the Measure U committee for getting passage of that. It makes a huge difference. It just really had our ability to provide public safety services. And when we talked about using it for salaries, we wanted to respect the Measure U monies that are available, and make sure that there are sufficient funds that are going to be available to carry out their programs that they run through council, etc. And so that's why we took the time and said these are surpluses. That's what we want to build on. And if we do take money out of there for the salaries, there's still sufficient monies over and above the program expenses. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I would, for the benefit of anyone who may have asked this question, we've heard comments in the past about the Measure U funds and refer to them as sales tax revenue earmarked for Measure U and its purposes. And we've also heard comments from people saying that they don't want to see Measure U funds applied to the general fund. And I'm wondering if either Alan or maybe the city attorney could clarify the distinction between what the Measure U transactions and use tax is and how it differentiates from sales tax, and clarify some of those issues, because I think there's some misconceptions that are out in the public.
I'll take the easy part. The easy part is what was passed was a general tax. It wasn't a specific tax for fire, for police and fire, public safety services. So it has to be dumped in the general fund. That's where it's put there. Lorena, nonetheless, accounts for it as if it were a separate amount. So when she goes to the Measure U committees and such, committee, she can pull, this is the revenue we received, this is when we received it, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of the overall bookkeeping of the city, at the end of the year, it's part of the general fund. He can distinguish between them. Sales tax, though.
All right, I'm going to give this a shot. Sales tax is a specific tax on transactions and sales and goods that for counties and cities is regulated by what's called the Bradley-Burns Uniform Local Sales and Use Tax Law. It's found in the California Revenue and Tax Code in Part 1.5 under Uniform Local Sales and Use Tax. You can find it at Revenue and Taxation Code sections 7,200 through 7,226. If you want me to go into the details of what the sales tax applies to and how it's calculated, that's beyond my legal capacity. I'm not a CPA. I would suggest that your sales tax consultant, Hindeleiter de Lamas, come in and provide the council with that information. They can do that far better than I can. However, the other tax, Measure U, is something that was imposed by the city. It's not countywide. It only applies within the city. And that was done also under the Revenue and Taxation Code, but under Part 1.6, Transactions and Use Taxes. And that can be found, there's actually a law called the Transactions and Use Tax Law. Revenue and Taxation Code 7251 through 7279.6. The reason I give you that kind of extraneous detail is to show that they are separate and distinct legal taxes. They're calculated slightly differently, which I really can't give you an easy explanation of, but I bet Hindeleiter de Lamas can. Both of those taxes are what are considered general taxes. Those are taxes that can be put to any municipal use. They all come into the city's general fund, and they would have intermingled in the general fund, but for the resolution that the city council adopted, several city council adopted, committing to use the revenue from the transactions and use tax only for public safety purposes. The resolution that we have has quite a long section that details all of the specific items for which Measure U can be used for. So Measure U can be used for almost any of the expenses, the regular operating expenses, salary, overhead, vehicles, things like that for the police and fire department. We cannot use Measure U funds for, say, paying for something in the water department or operating the library or running the finance department. There are certain things in our general fund that we can't use those expenditures for. I think that's about as much clarity as I can provide unless you have other specific questions about specific expenditures.
That's sufficient. And I appreciate you walking us through that because I don't know about the other council members, but I have heard from a number of people in the community expressing their opinion about the appropriateness of using Measure U funds to, quote, balance the budget. And I think it's important that that clarification is out there. I have Council Resolution 4703 up on my tablet right now, and under Section 3A, it lays out in detail what you just explained, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll paraphrase some of it, and it says that it may be expended on any and all regular and special expenses incurred for the operation and the provision of public safety services within the city. And then it goes into mutual aid and automatic aid agreements. And it says including but not limited to wages, benefits, and deferred compensation for police and fire personnel. So I just want to make sure that there is clarity on that people that are concerned about us robbing Measure U funds to balance the budget, we all signed